Hey Adam, what's going on?
How you doing?
Doing great, man. It's great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for doing this.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, first off, I don't know if you remember. You probably don't remember me, but we've actually met once before. Last time you played Albany, New York, the Alive at Five show with Lettuce.
Okay.
You came to the Hollow afterwards, and I was playing there with a band called Hartley's Encore, and you sat in.
Oh, hell yes,
And
man. I know those guys. You're in Hartley. It's great. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah. Yeah, I was playing bass that night and we played together a bit and you were really gracious and it was great to see you at Alive at 5.
Oh, that was a
Um,
great night. You guys had a killer drummer that night.
oh, yeah, yeah. We had Mike Gillette and Eric
Yeah.
Cravel on the drums.
Yeah.
Um,
I remember doing some double drum stuff that night. That was a vibe for sure.
yeah, yeah, I'm pretty sure we played Shining Star together.
Right. Right.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
My favorite song by my favorite band.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, do you have any plans to come to Albany again soon?
I'm sure it's on the schedule. I haven't looked to see exactly when that'll be, but we got to make it back. It's probably due time.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I have a lot of questions for you about, your philosophies on music. You span a lot of my favorite genres and get really deep into the concepts of those in the interviews I've listened to of yours. But I figured we could start off talking a little bit about, the stuff that you have coming up. I was a huge fan of Egyptian Secrets, and I was glad
Oh,
to see
thank you.
you start putting stuff out with your quartet, as well as Age of Imperfection. But
Uh,
can we expect a follow up to either of those albums anytime soon? Or are you more involved in the in like break?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, the follow up to Age Perfection is wrapped up and mastered, and we're just getting some visuals together and a lot of collaborations on there. Because a lot of my favorite musicians during the quarantine were just posting videos of themselves, just playing their piano or playing their guitar, and I was like, wow, this is like, this deserves to be heard. So I kind of like took some like little snippets of people playing on the internet and my friends,
Yeah,
and then chopped it up and made a record, in the style of Age of Perfection, like Dilla style with the beats. And yeah, so that's getting done right now. And the I recorded the second Nice Quartet record, and that is also mixed and mastered. And we're just deciding on a cover and a release date. And so yeah, I'm very excited about those two. And also, the new Lettuce record is done, and the new Break Science record is almost done.
oh wow. All right, so yeah, you got a lot coming, but that's not surprising. Your output is already so high. Um, there's so many singles I see you on with other people that I couldn't keep track of it all enough in my research for this. It's just like a never-ending slew of things to get through, but um, I can't wait to hear it all because that last Lettuce record was just like on another level. Um,
Oh, thank you, man.
and Lettuce has always been like pushing new stuff, but I was really excited to see you do Egyptian Secrets because it was nice to hear you in that context with going like a new direction. And I'm kind of interested to know, um, obviously that's more of a band improvisational vibe as opposed to Age of
Mm-hmm.
Imperfection, which showcases more of your production skills. But
Exactly. Yeah.
when you're thinking about how you're structuring the music for each of these, would you say that typically more produced music, like just hip hop in general, is still playing a large part in how you conceptualize your improvisation that goes into Egyptian Secrets, or do you try to get into a different headset?
Well, I just really love both styles of music. As far as production and like the Jay Dilla style of hip hop and Pete Rock and all my idols that I grew up listening to, DJ Premier. That's one side of who I am, and just being the guy that's in the studio with a bunch of rappers and just making the night and going to sleep at 5 in the morning and waking up, getting some breakfast, and doing it again.
Yeah.
And that's part of. I spent a lot of years just doing that. So I like to keep, also producing, that style of music. I like adding live instruments to that, and kind of having like snippets of different pieces of music, and it's a totally different art form, and I try to stay true to that as best as I can. And you look at Egyptian Secrets, which is basically a tribute to, like, say, a 1968 Idris Muhammad kind of record.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Who's one of my favorite drummers of all time. So I want to stay true to that, and it's still in a way it's kind of like a production, also because I wanted the aesthetic of the album to feel, have that reverb that they used in the late 1960s, and the sound of the drums to be that sort of vibe, and as well as the organ and the horns. So it's also, in a way, it's kind of like making a beat, in a sense, because you're conceptualizing the sound of the record, and not just the playing, and having a sound to it. So they're both connected in that sense, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, hip hop has helped expand like the rhythmic vocabulary of musicians in general, and I want to talk more about that in a second. But would you say that hip hop has influenced the way you? Well, I mean, obviously it has, but how has hip hop influenced the way you improvise? Because for me, as like a bass player, I think of it similar to James Brown and a lot of funk groups in the way that it affects how I build bass lines and backup soloists.
Yeah, absolutely. There's different kinds of improvisation, and the kind of improv that gets known is, the kind of free form improv, making stuff up, changing the beat, changing the notes all the time. And there's another side of improvisation where you're completely playing music that's unwritten and created on the spot, but everyone's playing a piece, a part, and it's funny that part playing is never considered improvisational to like, I guess, people that don't really understand, the concept. They see someone, like, my other band, Dark Wave, with John Badesky and Skerrick, which is like completely improv and all over the place, and everyone's playing 1,000 notes, and it's just, completely crazy. But Lettuce and the hip hop thing teaches you to, have restraint and create a part on the spot, as opposed to just kind of playing all over the place and calling that improvisation or free form. So I kind of look at hip hop as a groundwork, or a way to approach improvisation by having a loop, having a beat that you come up with on the spot, and you continue that loop, and that kind of sort. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and again, from the like both sides of it, from the more production side and more of a like a improvisational live side, I feel like you do a lot that is very in the middle, to varying degrees. Like you've played with DJ Quick's live band, which when I saw that on your resume, I was so excited. I mean, a legendary producer. I mean,
Absolutely. A
and
rapper, yeah.
I was curious to know if you had a particular favorite live hip hop band.
A particular live hip hop band?
Yeah, like who do you think has the best band today backing them up?
Oh wow, that's a great question. I mean, I really like what Robert's doing with Common, what Robert Glasper's doing.
Yeah, yeah,
Justin Tyson's on drums, and they're playing the stuff right, and when the way Justin approaches that is like playing, the beat and the tempo from the Common record. I like how they do that. There's this band Native Son that's out of Indianapolis. That's great. And they approach live hip hop, all the way to like an orchestral thing. They just did like a whole orchestral hip hop thing. I really like speaking of orchestra, I like the J Dilla Orchestra. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's like
no,
a
I
whole.
haven't.
It's called Suite for Ma Dukes, and
No.
it's a full like 60, 70 piece orchestra with Kareem Riggins on drums.
Oh, okay, I've
Um,
seen him on Instagram, but I haven't seen him like in
yeah. If
a
you
group
type in
setting
"Sweet
like
for
that.
Ma Dukes" on YouTube, it'll blow your mind. So those definitely, there's countless
Yeah,
others, but those are the three that come up off the top of my head.
yeah. Have you seen Kendrick Lamar's band? He's got videos up of like I think doing like I or some of his. I mean, I'm sure he's got great arrangements for everything, but the way they take those arrangements and expand upon them,
Absolutely, yeah. Hip hop is growing, and Kendrick is at the forefront of inserting musicians, the best musicians in the scene, into his hip hop concept, and just growing with it. and keeping it cool and keeping instruments in people's faces, and as opposed to like the other rappers that just come out with just a DJ. It's good for young people to come out and see a concert, a real hip hop concert with musicians there.
Yeah.
But it depends on the musicians. You can't get any musician. You got to get musicians that have a hip hop concept. And I would say that we're still at like the 40% mark where musicians are hip hop aware and love it, as well as loving jazz, rock, funk, R&B, soul, gospel, reggae. You have to also be a hip hop head. And it used to be when I was coming up, it was like 10% of musicians were that. You know what I mean? Like, had any concept of hip hop, as well as their instrument and the history of their instrument and all that stuff. So I think we're growing in that direction, and I hope to get to the 100% mark where musicians that grew up with hip hop and they're incorporating that into their music.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it's such a huge part of music of all around the world that I think it's just undeniably gonna keep encompassing more of, what's influencing new music. And also, I feel like on the other side of things, you have hip hop artists who are becoming more and more involved with live music in creative ways. I mean, obviously from the beginning it's been happening. Obviously, you've got people like Madlib who did work with Blue Note and was getting very involved with jazz artists. But
and of course you have to mention Questlove and the Roots. Without them, they're like the they're the original guys that really bonded together and really struggled at the beginning to get their concept across. And I was at a lot of their shows where there wasn't a lot of people, and then eventually it started. After years, 20-something, 30 years of them doing that, it started to become like this like thing, But they get tons of props for their work in that department.
Yeah, and also I feel like there's groups like Carl Denson's Tiny Universe where they're incorporating hip hop production techniques and like scratching things into like a jazz or improv context. Do you know of any other groups that I should check out that are doing a good job of layering over production techniques into a live improv setting?
Well, you're describing break science right now, and that's really where we're at. We're playing live, and we also have a lot of little things and little samples of percussion and just all kinds of different electronic things weaved in, and we're kind of delving into a deeper like situation where we're playing live and leaning less on the computer. There's no more computer drums. There's no more any of that. It's all me, doing the drums. It's all, most of the key parts are being played live by Borum, but we're incorporating, Benny Bloom and sometimes my friend Paris, who's playing trumpet with us sometimes, and we have a great bass player, Hunter Roberts, who's a phenomenal jazz bassist. So we're just kind of really moving forward along that line and trying to create our own little lane with that style.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, for me, I definitely am more familiar with your work on Lettuce and your solo albums. Honestly, Break Science is still something I need to dig deeper into. So I'm definitely looking forward to doing more of my homework.
When you get a chance, check out the Break Science live band. It's on YouTube. There's a bunch of live concerts, and that probably has a bunch of the Lettuce guys doing that. And we're just like approaching like this place where we're trying to find a seamless way to incorporate electronics into a band, and do it with a hip hop context.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a little embarrassing as an interviewer to admit it, but like I said, you've got so much stuff coming out. It's really hard. It's really hard to get all my ducks in a row. But I'd rather be honest.
No, I appreciate it. Hey man, I'll take it. Also Dr. Claw is another band I have from New Orleans, and it features Nigel Hall, Ian Neville, and Nick Daniels, and it's a total amazing collaboration with some amazing New Orleans guys, and we just cut a record, and that's going to be coming out. And I also have another trio called Nightcap, which is with Josh Fairman of Sun Squabby, a really popular band, and my friend Ian Gilly, who's a phenomenal keyboardist, and we're doing sort of like I guess I want to say like future R&B instrumental, future soul stuff, almost like influenced by Kiefer and a lot of newer artists that are kind of like doing like a mix of sort of jazz and hip hop in a new way with live instrumentation. So
Yeah.
yeah, Nightcap, Dr. Claw, Lettuce, the Quartet. Yeah, so there's a bunch of stuff coming out.
Yeah, like I said, it's your rate of productivity's crazy. I don't know how you balance it. Um, I mean, again, I have more on the hip hop theory that I want to get back to, but do you have any advice for artists who are maybe biting off more than they can chew and how they can balance their schedule and stay productive and tackle everything they want to hit on?
Yeah, I mean, just be as organized as possible and just finish things and have like a dry erase board in your house where you write down what needs to be done. Album cover needs to be done, so the date for the single, the date for the release of the album, and how is it the distribution element of it, getting it up on Spotify at the right time and promoting it correctly, and all those things are very important. And I'm lucky to have a great manager, Hillary, who actually helps me kind of compartmentalize all that stuff and helps deal with a lot of that. And that came after years of me just kind of hustling and getting it going. And when you work with someone that understands what you're trying to do and accomplish, and they're a friend, and it could really help, as opposed to trying to do everything yourself. It could get really, you could end up with your head buried.
Yeah,
you know
yeah. Um, well, back on the topic of, I guess, the influence that hip hop has had on other genres. Clearly, hip hop has really changed the game as far as what people, are expected to do rhythmically on a gig. Is there a particular producer who you feel like has I mean, obviously guys like Jay Dilla are known for their feels. I mean, I don't know if there's a specific Jay Dilla beat or another specific producer whose sense of rhythm has really changed how you view your own rhythm.
That's a great question. I would say absolutely DJ Premier. Um, the producer of Gangstar and many other things from Nas to Rakim, and he's worked with every Biggie,
Yeah.
all the greats, and he has a very distinct swing in his drums and the way he produces his drums on the MPC, and it's in a way it's kind of DC Gogo based because it has that super triplety swing, super swing stuff, and and there were no drummers playing like that when I was coming up in like late 80s, early 90s, and I was just practicing along, and I was like, wow, this is like a thing that drummers are not listening to because I don't hear anybody playing like this. So I kind of gravitated towards it, and a lot of the improvs that we go into with Lettuce, I could switch from a DJ Premier thing, or I can go into a Pete Rock thing. Pete Rock is from Mount Vernon. He's Pete Rock and CL Smooth. We're
Yeah,
a
yeah.
legendary group, and Pete Rock is kind of like our local hero because I grew up near that area. So he's kind of a huge influence, very soulful, dripping with soul and funk, and there would be no Jay Dilla without Primo and Pete Rock. So,
Yeah.
you just switch modes. When I'm in an improvisational mode, it's like it's like, oh, this would be, some sort of premiere kind of vibe, and this would be great. Or, maybe like some really loosey-goosey hi-hat Jay Dilla stuff, or maybe some like kind of light, airy drums, like some Mad Lib that don't really bash over the beat, and they kind of just sneak in the beat, like that kind of style.
Yeah.
And then there's time for like a vintage Kanye feel, or sometimes it's time for so you got to have as many producers in your bag as a musician, and you could switch gears, when you're improvising or writing with a group.
Yeah. I mean, for me personally, like Pete's Instrumentals has had a
Yes,
huge
absolutely.
influence on me. Um, another album that's probably one of my favorite albums of all time, maybe like top five albums for me, is A Tribe Called Quest, Midnight Marauders.
Absolutely. I
And
mean, without that record, that influenced everybody from Pete Rock and J Dilla and everybody. And obviously I was in the basement playing along with those tracks for a long time. So it's a huge influence. It's the it's Q-Tip had a lot to do with the production on that, and he's an absolute musical genius.
Yeah, I mean, it's I haven't seen liner notes that break it down enough where I can tell who has done what. And I know Q-Tip. Some people say he's like a de facto leader, but like I don't, just regardless, whatever that combination is, whether it's like Bob Powers mixing or I don't know who does what,
It
but
was a
the
combination of a
sound of
bunch of
that
stuff. Yeah,
record,
you're absolutely right. But
like,
I think Q-Tip's concepts for flipping jazz with like really amazing sounding drum things that he finds on rare records, and he's a true digger of records, and he finds all those records to this day. Like no one has really used those, like he just found these amazing records and took these tiny pieces and created these legendary albums. So everything Tribe Called Quest has done is hugely influential.
yeah. Um, Now, as so those are like some funky producers. Now, on the side of just straight, like funk and jazz drummers, whose feel has influenced you a lot? And I do want to start out. I know that somewhere on your list, I'm gonna guess Mike Clark is in there. Am I right about that?
I mean, absolutely for that style. Yeah, if you're gonna play Herbie Hancock's music, um, to ignore Mike Clark's vocabulary is pure ignorance to me. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like his drumming and Harvey Mason's drumming on the Herbie Hancock records are
Yeah.
so much a part of the songs.
Yeah.
And just their vocabulary, the kind of fills they do, the kind of sounds, the way their snare drum sounds, the way they use the hi-hat. It's all those things. So, I try to, if I'm, Lettuce basically started out as a Herbie Hancock cover band, playing all his tunes. Herbie and Maceo was like our this is what we're going to work on, and then we're going to write from there. So, those drummers are just, to me, the Bible of like jazz funk.
Yeah. For me personally, I mean, Mike Clark and Paul Jackson is one of the like has had probably the most influence on me as like a rhythmic duo.
Yeah.
Especially in the realm of funk.
Cool.
But I know that on Egyptian Secrets, you had that voicemail from Mike Clark at the end of the album, which was like such a like special thing for me to see because, yeah, just that connection in like the history of great drummers. It's cool
I mean,
to see
I'm
him.
so lucky. Yeah, I was gonna say about Mike. I'm so lucky that Will Blades, the organist in the quartet, is good friends with him. And I was like, "Are you serious? You're friends?" He's like, "I give it Mike all the time. It's my boy." I'm like, "You got to be kidding me!" Like, so he ended up introducing us, and then we became friends. And I was like, "Oh, Mike, you gotta be my dad." He's like a jazz funk drummer. Now Mike and my dad are friends, and my mom and Mike are friends. Like.
Yeah.
So it's just like he's become family. It went from like this total idol, like when I was 18 years old, we had the Flood album, which is Herbie Hancock Flood, and not a lot of people know the Flood record. It's one of the best live Herbie records ever, and it's Mike Clark on the whole thing. And I used to just really listen to it for hours and hours and hours on vinyl. So, just to get to know him, and then, just left me that message after he heard the record, the voicemail. And I was like, I kept saving it. And then eventually I was like, Mike, you think I could use that? He's like, go right ahead, man. He's like, so cool.
Yeah.
So I was super honored he did that.
Yeah. Have you heard the record, the Mike Clark, Paul Jackson record, The Funk Stops Here?
Yep. Absolutely.
That's another one. I mean, Paul Jackson's bass playing to me is like the epitome of jazz funk. The way he, like you said, like he creates parts, but he keeps the improv going and slowly changes with them. Is very reactionary, but
exactly
the motive.
He has a part that's holding on to the groove, and he has another part of his bass line that he plays up high that's kind of improvised every bar.
Yeah.
So he's a genius like that. To have like a part, low note that's kind of repeating, but then a higher note, a brick booms, all these different notes he's playing on top. That's just like kind of like a rhythm guitar part on top of a bass line.
Yeah, yeah.
So he's a genius, absolutely.
Yeah, rest in peace, Paul Jackson.
Rest in peace, Paul.
I've
Sure.
probably said it so many times on the show since he passed, but he's just a legend.
Absolutely.
And now, is there? Do you make a big distinction between funk drummers and swing drummers? Like, obviously, that's two different tool sets to be using, but do you consider them each equally groovy, or do you think it's kind of like a whole different uh, way of feeling that has to be developed?
It's a vast world of music out there, and if you're talking jazz drummers, there's people. There's like the Shadow Wilsons, the Papa Joe Jones, who are like the most grooving cats imaginable. And then who else? Jimmy Cobb, Art Taylor. They're completely grooving, but on the ride cymbal.
Yeah.
And that was the style that they were doing. Then you have guys like Rashid Ali and Elvin Jones, who are kind of like have an avant-garde perspective on the kid, and it's kind of like a freer version of that. So it's all the eras of something to teach you from, and to learn from. And I try to delve deep, from that to like Afro-Cuban drumming, reggae drumming, just all around, and try to get a sense of the real stuff, and as opposed to like secondhand stuff,
Yeah.
and just go back and just deal with those records. And the more you just absorb and through osmosis, the bigger your bag of ideas becomes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for me, when it comes to that straight ahead swinging sort of bag, I mean, I'm a big Elvin Ron Carter guy, but I think my favorite of all time has to be Mingus and Danny Richmond.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have a particular favorite bass and drum lockup when it comes to just swinging hard?
I mean, there's so many. I really love Ron and Tony Williams together. I really love, PC and Jimmy Cobb. What they did with Miles is just so classic and forever hip and new. Yeah, I mean, Elvin and Jimmy Garrison, of course, are iconic with their style and where they put the pocket. And then I would have to add McCoy to that, McCoy Tyner, because his pocket with those guys, they created something new in jazz music. So, I could keep going. Jack DeJohnette, Gary Peacock, with Keith Jarrett, they have a thing that just works together. And, Gary kind of holds Jack's, groove in place in a way, because Jack is very free and can move around a lot, but Gary has a way of reading that and bring it all in. And rest in peace, Gary Peacock. Yeah. So there's so many. There's so many.
Yeah, I feel you. It's but it's just cool to hear about, and then occasional things that I get to pick up on. You've already given me a lot of great homework to do, just in this conversation. But I did want to see if you could school me on one thing quickly. I'm not super familiar with the history of Gogo, and I know you're a Gogo nerd, Adam.
Yeah, I'm about it.
So, would you be able to give a little introductory explanation for the listeners on the history of Gogo, and as brief as you want to be, but
I'm not really the one that's qualified to be talking about this, but since the early '80s, I've been listening to a lot of hip hop, and I realized, around 2002, when I was touring with Average White Band, started playing places like DC, and I got to hang with some of the local musicians there. It was really eye-opening, and I got to learn a lot about, the vibe. And I realized that the early hip-hop I was listening to was samples of Go-Go records from Chuck Brown and Trouble Funk. I don't know if you know those two.
No, I don't.
Chuck Brown is considered the godfather. He's the James Brown of Go-Go. Chuck Brown and the Soul Searchers. If you just look up the Soul Searchers, you'll find the very early ideas. Apparently it came from the song by Grover Washington, Mr. Magic. And
Oh
so there was a
yeah,
song, and they would take that groove, and the crowd would be dancing so hard that they would just like play the song for 30 minutes straight because people were moving. The idea of playing a song for 5 minutes and then it ends, and then it was kind of like it wasn't working in DC, and there were people partying and they wanted to dance, and the band had to continue that groove, so they kind of used Mr. Magic as a with that beat, boom, 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 and then by adding the percussion and having percussion breaks with no music and just maybe the whole band just a hit on the one, that kind of thing. So it just kind of developed into where it is now with bands like Backyard Band and Northeast Groovers, and they're still evolving the beat. Now it's turned into there's a style called bounce beat, which is kind of almost like a rock and roll version of like a Timberland kind of electronic straight or like a trap kind of beat, but they're playing with open hi-hats and timbales on all 16 notes, and it's really kind of slowed down and more flat, flat groove as opposed to triplets. So the go-go thing is still evolving, and it's amazing. And Lettuce was lucky enough to work with Big Tony from Trouble Funk, who was the bass player and vocalist of that band, and they're just absolute legends. If you go back to Curtis Mayfield, Run DMC, most of the late 80s artists sampled Trouble Funk. So yeah, we were really lucky to work with him, and also Jungle Boogie, who's an amazing percussionist, conga player from DC, who played with Chuck Brown. He played with EU, and he's just an absolute legend. So I'm always asking those guys questions and getting schooled by them on the history of the music and how it's evolving and different cowbell parts and conga parts and everything. So I love to get deep into it. But hip hop wouldn't exist without Go-Go's late 70s explosion in DC, and just the style of keeping people dancing and grooving and having that swing in there, and I guess the New York style was to sample it and to kind of use it turntables as a way of incorporating that feel.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, like I've heard Questlove in interviews talk about go-go, and I like to consider myself a big early hip hop nerd, but that's another leg of the history that I feel like I've just left out, like I haven't quite gotten the grasp of yet. And I appreciate the perspective, so I can do, like I said, you give me homework. I can't wait to look
No
into it.
doubt, man. That's what life is about, man.
Yeah, well, I guess one last thing on hip hop. I mean, I know you started producing at a relatively early age, um, but I'm curious to know when did your concept of production come to a point where um, you were reaching the artists that influence you. You were starting to get to work with people that were really you know at the root of what got you into production in the first place. Is there like a particular moment where you kind of you felt like you made it as a producer?
No, I never really considered myself, a made producer. I had a few artists on my bucket list that I wanted to work with. Redman, Talib Kweli, um, Jizza from Wu-Tang Clan, and through connections in New York and being on the scene and also playing live and playing live hip hop allowed me to be in a space where people would like, oh, let's check out, you make tracks too, let's hear that. You don't just play drums. What else you got?
Yeah.
So that made me excited to, kind of get the production stuff together, especially, we were doing shows with them, like backing up, doing like hip hop nights with our group, the Fire Department, which was me and Eric Krasno
Yep.
and Neil Evans. And we were doing shows where one night we had like Black Thought, and we had all these rappers, like amazing, incredible, like legends on stage with us. And this is like early 2000s. And it just put us in a situation where we were able to get in the studio with these MCs and work. So, kind of approaching it from another side, as opposed to like being the guy that's just, handing out beat tapes to people, which is I do that as well. But throwing events, hip hop events in your neighborhood and wherever you live, with a live band, and sometimes you'll meet MCs through that, and they look at you as a different breed of human. You're not just trying to make some money off them doing, making a beat. You might want to do some shows with them. You might want to put together a tour with them. So you enter into a new stratosphere of relationship with a lot of these MCs, and I've ended up working with them and doing live shows with them. I started working with Jizza in 2003 or 4, and then we ended up doing Bonnaroo with Wu-Tang in 2015 or 16, like something like that. So it just, you never know how it's going to end up. You just got to, look at the big picture, and if you're able to help out an artist or an MC, and, especially a young one, you can't always shoot for the big time guys. You got to sometimes, if it's a young MC that you like, that has something in them that you feel is, representative of the kind of hip hop you like, work with that person for free.
Yeah.
And make some beats and make an EP with them and put it out, so, and that builds your karma in the business, because someone hears that, all of a sudden you get a call from whoever, Kendrick Lamar. Hey, I like the production on this record you did. Someone passed it to me. The engineer that worked on that record, you never know. It could be any connection,
Yeah.
The engineers that are in the studio, and those are guys you want to know and meet, and they know all the rappers, and they know how to get in touch. So there's a lot of angles to do it. But I ended up just moving into the live scene because I really enjoy the instant gratification of playing music and having people scream for it. And that's what I've been dedicating my life to for the past, 8 years, basically.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, you've got such an amazing history with so many musicians. It's so cool to hear your perspective on it and how you got into it.
Thank you, man.
And as rich as your career in music is, the last thing I want to touch on is I have some comedians on the show too, but mostly musicians, and I love to ask the musicians about how the world of comedy looks from their perspective, and who is your favorite artist in the comedy space right now.
I gotta say, Eric Benny Bloom from Lettuce. I think. I mean, if you guys don't know him, he's just one of the funniest human beings alive. He can impersonate anyone after meeting them for 5 minutes. He can, he's just so good at mimicking and doing accents and voices, and I love. He's kind of in a way really helped out Lettuce with his style of comedy. I really love Tony Baker. What he does on Instagram, and his stand up comedy, just very low key and funny, and he does he narrates a lot of animals, things that animals are doing, and he narrates it in different voices, and it's fucking genius and hilarious. What's his name? The football player that's hilarious.
Spice Adams.
Spice is great. About 5, 6, 7 years ago when he first started, I sent him a Lettuce song on the internet. I said, "Would you mind doing a reaction video to this?" And he did it, and he bopped his head and did the scrunchy face thing, So I've been a fan of his, and now he's got millions of followers, and he's got a thing with Shaq now, and it's just he always cracks me up. It's just everything he does is just I'm dying, I'm just he just cracks me up. Of course the gods Chappelle and Afion Crockett, and those guys are really crushing shit right now.
Yeah, man, that's just another thing I like to nerd out about. So it's so cool to hear what you're into. And those guys, I don't hear a lot of people mentioning Tony Baker, but he's been grinding on Instagram for so long. And he's got 2 million followers now, I think. And you see his stuff just popping up and shared in the most random places.
He's viral, and he deserves all that, because he really can. You could be having a fucked up day. Messed up day, and then all of a sudden, you click on a Tony Baker, and you're just laughing, and you send it to all your friends, and then they're laughing. So it's that's what he doesn't see, is all the shares, the DMs of the Tony Bakers to all my friends, and the conversations and the laughs that happen. So he really does spread, him and Spice spread a lot of love through their work, online, and I think that's a brilliant way. And Haha Davis is another really funny guy. Yeah. He's always screaming at something and yelling, and he's kind of third in line to those two, but the three of them crack me up. They're just on another level.
Yeah. Well, again, man, I really appreciate you doing the show. It's really great to hear your take on stuff. And but before we're done, is there anything you want to remind people to be keeping an eye out for? Any places they should be keeping an eye out for your work?
Yeah, I mean, just definitely go to Deitch Anime, at Deitch Anime Instagram, and that's where I'm posting all my shows and my new projects coming out, new albums dropping. Go to the Spotify and check it out. Lettuce new album in February. We're still pretty sure. We're not 100% sure of the album name yet, but it's our best work yet, and it's got Bootsy Collins on the record.
Nice.
Yeah, we did a track with Bootsy, with King Bootsy, and it's a life changer, and it's the most important, biggest thing I've ever been a part of in my entire life. Just writing a tune and sending it to him, and him doing the vocals, and then adding bass, and just being so excited about the project, and talking to him and his wife Patty. It's just like a dream come true. So really excited about that. I hope everyone gets called. The song is called "Keep the Funk Alive."
Sounds legendary.
Yeah.
Anything with Bootsy on it, it's gonna be funky.
Yeah,
Dude,
the man.
I'm so excited to hear it, man. But thank you again, and hopefully I'll be seeing you at a show sometime soon.
Cool, man. Say hi to the guys for me, and yeah, we'll talk soon.